It seems to me that alliances, whether forged in the ancient world or in contemporary politics, in the modern landscape, are fragile constructs. And when an ally reneges on their commitments, the repercussions are often catastrophic. History teaches us that alliances survive not merely because they exist on paper, because of the continuous mutual benefit and trust that they provide to the various partners. And their failure, in many cases, has led to diplomatic realignments, wars, and the collapse of states. If you go back to ancient Rome, the Latin League, an alliance of cities in Latium, was initially a cooperative coalition against common threats. But as Rome grew in power, its partners felt increasingly subordinate rather than equal allies. And when the League demanded equal status in the 340s, Rome refused, leading to the Latin War in 340 to 338. And the result, Rome dismantled the League entirely and forced individual treaties upon its former allies, subsuming them into its growing state. And here is seen the alliance breaking down because of Rome's unwillingness to treat its allies as equals. Hannibal's invasion of Italy during the Second Punic War exposed the fragilities of Rome's alliances, and Capua, a significant ally, switched sides in 216 BC, believing that Rome was doomed and that aligning with Carthage would secure its future. Rome's response was merciless. Capua was besieged, its senate executed, its people enslaved, and the lesson, betrayal within an alliance often leads to retribution, and those who seek opportunistic shifts in loyalty suffer dire consequences. Tacitus framed the social war in 91 to 88 BC, or BCE, as a fight for Roman citizenship. But this interpretation oversimplifies the deeper reality. The Italian allies, having fought in Rome's wars for generations, expected Rome to honour its obligations to them, and when Rome failed to grant them equal status, they revolted. This wasn't simply a desire for integration, but a reaction against a failed alliance, one in which Rome took without giving. The war was brutal, and when Rome ultimately granted citizenship to most Italians, it did so only after considerable bloodshed. Here we see an alliance breaking down not because the parties wished to separate, but because Rome failed to uphold its obligation. The Aetolian League initially allied with Rome against Macedonia, but later turned against Rome, aligning with the Seleucid king Antiochus III, and Rome viewed this as treachery, crushed the League, and stripped it of power. This demonstrates again that alliances depend on the perception of reliability. Rome had come to expect unwavering loyalty from its allies and responded ruthlessly when that loyalty was questioned. Prussia's failure to commit decisively to its allies against Napoleon led to disaster. And while initially hesitant to engage, Prussia eventually declared war in 1806, only to be swiftly defeated by Napoleon, and its delay in fulfilling its obligations cost it dearly, leading to occupation and subjugation until the Treaty of Tilsit. This serves as a cautionary tale, doesn't it? A hesitant ally is as good as no ally at all, and the failure to act decisively within an alliance framework can lead to strategic disaster. And that brings us to the present. History repeats itself, and today we're witnesses to a modern iteration of alliance failure as former President and now current President Donald Trump, former human and now individual with wig, dismisses its NATO commitments, his withdrawal of intelligence sharing, his open questioning of America's long-standing alliances that demonstrates that regardless of treaties or historical precedent, alliances for Trump are only as strong as the will to uphold them, and that will is broken. His abrupt decision-making has left allies like Ukraine vulnerable, as strategic commitments once considered ironclad are now subject to the whims of an individual. Alliances are fragile and conditional. Nations or city-states remain loyal as long as the alliance serves their interest. But when those alliances are broken, that is a significant moment of betrayal. And betrayal often leads to severe retribution. Rome's destruction of Capua and the Latin League shows that disloyalty carries consequences. Hesitation within an alliance can be disastrous. Prussia's indecision in the Napoleonic Wars led to occupation. Sometimes breaking an alliance is strategic, Italy's defection in World War One, for example, proved beneficial. And modern alliances rely more on economic and diplomatic pressures rather than outright conquest, but their fragility remains. Italy's defection, in World War Two. Trump's approach to alliances mirrors historical precedent in undermining collective security. When an ally fails to uphold its commitments, the consequences range from diplomatic realignment to outright war. I don't for 1 minute think that Ukraine is going to declare war on America. But it may not be about. It may not be any longer about whether or not America pursues an isolationist agenda. It may now be a matter that America cannot be trusted by the rest of the world. That means it cannot be trusted to broker a deal with Putin. That means whatever deal Putin arranges out of the Ukraine conflict isn't reliable. Suddenly, for the first time, we know that Russia's word is not reliable. Now we know that America's word is not reliable. That is a worrying position to be in. Whether in ancient Rome, Napoleonic Europe, or the present day, the failure of an alliance remains a defining moment in history. And the reality is that alliances are only as strong as the mutual trust that sustains them. If history teaches us anything, it's that when alliances falter, when allies fail, conflict is on the horizon, and that I think is very worrying. Trump came in with the promise of peace. What he's actually brought is the four horsemen of the apocalypse. This is very, very disturbing. I think the news this morning is slightly more disturbing than the humiliation of Zelensky on Friday.